So the purpose of this hearing today is to shed a light on one of the problems associated with the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We have disputes about land. We have disputes about the size of the Ukrainian military, how big it should be, what capability it should have. Do we have NATO-type troops on the ground, making sure there's no third invasion? Should they be in NATO? If not, should they forever be barred? So these are areas of dispute. One area of dispute looms large for all of us on this committee, Republican and Democrat. Here's the dispute. Our Ukrainian allies claim 19,546 reports of unlawful deportation and forced transfer of children in the occupied areas of Ukraine by Russia. Let me say this again. People in Ukraine and organizations are claiming that Putin's Russia has separated over 19,000 Ukrainian children from their families, trying to turn them into Russians. How can you end this war unless every child is accounted for? The purpose of the hearing today is to make a record as to whether or not this claim is legitimate. I invited the Russian ambassador. There's his table. It's small, but that's the best we can do. He didn't show up. So this dispute needs to be defined and it needs to be resolved. Again, you cannot honorably end this conflict unless you account for every child taken by Putin's Russia from Ukraine, period. All of us know we'll never get a perfect deal. There'll be sacrifices made. But one of the sacrifices we're not going to make is to give Russia 19,000 Ukrainian children. That's not a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I doubt if anybody up here is willing to make that sacrifice. This is not about land. This is about families. It's about the very fabric of society. How would you feel if it were one of your children? What would you want the world to do? I'd want the world to get my kid back. Is that asking too much? I don't think so. As to our Russian friends, they have 210 facilities people have identified, 39 sites where children go for direct military training, 130 sites that deal with their re-education, making them Russian. I'm not making this up. This is 2025, not 1945. This is going on in 2025, and it needs to stop.
And I have spoken to those, some of them, Ukrainian children who have been taken hostage. Of all the moments in my life of this privilege of public service, which we all have, this one will stay with me forever. Talking to children about how they were declared orphans because the Russians killed their parents, or simply abducted by Russian soldiers. I cannot describe to you the absolute brutality and inhumanity with which they were treated. 10-month-old Margarit Prokopenko, who was kidnapped by Russians under the false pretense of medical examination and rehabilitation. Her name and citizenship were changed, and her birthplace was altered from Kherson, Ukraine, to Podolsk, Russia. In another case, 16-year-old Artem, forcibly taken by Russian soldiers to an orphanage where he said he slept, quote, on sagging metal beds, no bedding, just blankets, terrible sanitation. Every day we ate barley stew, strange compote, and crackers, end quote. 9-year-old Ilya lived with his mother in Mariupol when the war began. Quote, I love my school and my friends, he said. We had a beautiful home. His mother was killed by in a Russian missile strike. He buried her in their backyard. He was transferred to a hospital in Donetsk where he underwent surgery without anesthesia and was told by Russian doctors that he shouldn't say glory to Ukraine anymore.
And it's one thing to have the numbers that we all use about the number of kids that are over there, some of them as old as teenagers, some of them as young as 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. It's another to actually sit across the table from them and their families. I met Sashko, who was taken from his home in Mariupol after being wounded in a Russian bombardment. At our breakfast, he was there with his brave grandma, Ludmila, who told me she eventually took matters into her own hands, this grandma, when he was able to get a cell phone and call her, and she went into the occupied territory to rescue him. With the Pope, I stood next to Veronica, who was confined in Russia against her will for both her 13th and her 14th birthdays, including periods of time in isolation before she managed to escape. These are tragic stories of childhoods forever changed by brutality.
They're going on right now. Russia needs to understand these children must come home. They must be repatriated with their families. We need an ironclad security agreement, unlike the '94 Budapest Agreement that didn't have that. And as I passed the wartime supplemental in the House, passed by the Senate, Russia needs to pay for its own crimes. The Russian Federation has abducted at least 20,000 children that we know of, and every expert I've talked to believes the number's higher, much higher than that. They are also indoctrinating and militarizing Ukrainian children in the occupied territories, possibly up to 1 million. They're shipped to Russia, stripped of their identities, tortured, forced to memorize propaganda, and told their country and their own families are the enemy. Finally, many of them are sent to the front lines of the Russian war itself. Imagine a child age 16 being sent to the front lines to fight against their own homeland.
Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours.
The destiny of Ukrainian boys and girls abducted by Russia, unfortunately, is not an abstract issue. It is a deliberate action conducted as a regular Russian tactics of war. It is Ukraine's and wider common knowledge that since the beginning of the Russian full-scale aggression, thousands of Ukrainian children have been abducted and forcibly trafficked from their homes, separated from their families, or removed from the orphanages and foster care institutions in the temporarily occupied territories, and also transferred to Russia or Belarus. These children were subjected not only to a forcible transfer, but to a change of their names, their language, their identity, and even their citizenship. These elements alone have no other name but an instrument of war. Humanitarian evacuation, not even close. As a scale which is under aggression, Ukrainian nation has not only been documenting and speaking and being vocal about these crimes. Together with international partners and our allies and volunteers, we mobilize efforts to take every step we can to bring every innocent soul back to their families, back to their lands. But only with all of these efforts, it was only a small fraction of these children who were able to come back home. Each child's return is a miracle of diplomacy, coordination, and extraordinary courage from their parents who traveled through multiple countries, through the war zones, just to reclaim their sons and daughters back. But for every child who makes it home, many more remain missing, hidden and trapped in systems that are designed to keep them away from Ukraine and from the truth of what happened to them. As a mother, I cannot accept that any government would treat children as a trophies of war or bargaining chip in a geopolitical negotiations. Russia launched the war of its aggression not only 4 years ago, but 11 years ago. It occupied part of our territories and decided it could claim our children as its own. As early as 2015, Russia was already taking Ukrainian children from occupied Crimea by train to Moscow. This was called a rescue or evacuation operation. These children were taught that they are not Ukrainians. They don't belong to anything they related them in their previous lives. As an ambassador, I may say it straightforwardly. The forced transfer and deportation, including abduction of our children from occupied territories, is a grave breach of international law and can constitute a war crime. Bringing Ukrainian children back shall not be subjected to discussion. It is a central element of any discussion about peace and future relations of Russia, be it US or any country around the globe. So at this point, we know that there are at least 210 sites which are known as the indoctrination places across the occupied territories. We mobilized the efforts under the leadership of President Zelensky, who united international players and domestic players on the umbrella of the initiative Bring Kids Back, which we're doing everything to locate our children back. We created national programs dedicated to this issue, and we are cooperating with international partners. But we cannot succeed alone. These children are scattered across the vast territory. We need to make our voices heard, and we are grateful to helping us. Based on the information provided above, it is our duty to reach out to respectful members of Senate with the next elements. It is our position that we require the unconditional return of all the children within the peace process. We also ask you to keep this issue on top of the international agenda to the extent it is possible.
Now we'll hear from the head of Bring Kids Back. You can state your name for the record, please.
It's Maxim Maximov.
Thank you.
Honorable Chairman, Ranking Member, Senators, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. When speaking about the abduction and identity erasure of Ukrainian children, I feel deep responsibility because nothing in the Russia's war reveals its intent more clearly than what it does to Ukrainian children. In occupied towns and villages, Ukrainian language, history, and culture are removed from schools, and children are taught a worldview that tears them off from Ukraine. And Russia executes this strategy methodically. First, children are isolated. Family, teachers, and friends are cut off, leaving a child disoriented and without familiar support structures. Then, Russia dismantles the identity. Being Ukrainian becomes something to hide. New documents, new guardians, and at 14, an imposed Russian citizenship, all designed to sever the legal and emotional path back. Over time, this pressure reshapes a child's sense of who they are and where they belong. Finally, when identity is weakened, militarization begins. Children enter state-run programs where they train with drones, practice assault drills, and absorb wartime ideology. By 18, that imposed citizenship becomes the basis for conscription, to send them to fight the country they were taken from. Senators, through coordinated efforts under the Bring Kids Back UA initiative, 1,859 children have been returned back to Ukraine. Your leadership and your pressure directly determines how many more will come home.
Chairman Graham, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Let me show you a few photos. These are Katya and Ira, sisters abducted from occupied Crimean Peninsula in 2015 and sent to the Republic of 𝐷𝐸𝐴. I have been following their fate for 11 years and know that these kids are raised as Russian citizens in the foster family of the enemy state. Can they or other 1,000 children abducted from Crimea be considered evacuated under international humanitarian law? What about thousands more who after 2022 ended up in 57 Russian regions under similar circumstances? IHL clearly regulates evacuation of children. It requires Russia to take all feasible steps to reunite families. Russia must submit a list of evacuated children to the ICRC. Given the exceptional nature of evacuation, Russia must regularly assess the grounds for keeping children and return them immediately once the necessity ends. Russia has fulfilled none of these obligations. No list, no assessment, no voluntary repatriation. Instead, abduction, Russification, forcible passportization, and adoption. My organization documented 165 re-education camps where Ukrainian children are militarized and Russified. These camps exist in occupied territories, in Russia, in Belarus, and in North Korea. In this photo, you can see 12-year-old Misha from the occupied Donetsk region. And in this one, 16-year-old Lisa from occupied Simferopol. They were sent to the Sondovon camp in the North Korea, 9,000 kilometers from home. Amnesty for war criminals is not an option for us. That is why Russia must immediately and unconditionally return all abducted Ukrainian children via international and independent mechanism. That is why we cannot recognize occupied territories as Russian, neither de jure nor de facto, as it would undermine international legal order, peace and security, making us complicit in these crimes.
Thank you. Mr. Raymond.
I want to start with my heartfelt thanks to you, Chairman Graham, you, Ranking Member Schatz, and to all the people who made this pivotal hearing possible today. My name is Nathaniel Raymond. I've been a war crimes investigator for over 25 years, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Humanitarian Research Lab at the Yale School of Public Health. I'm testifying on my own behalf, not on behalf of Yale, and definitely not on behalf of Harvard. That was a joke. And the views expressed are my own. What I want to do today is two things. I want to tell the story of how U.S. assistance has been essential in this case, and I want to give you facts about what we found at the Humanitarian Research Lab over our 3.5 years of investigation. We were called in the summer of 2022 as part of a State Department program called the Conflict Observatory. We were given the mission to investigate reports that Russia was systematically taking kids from territory they were occupying following the full-scale invasion. Frankly, I initially didn't think we could complete the request, but we had a break in the case, which was that mayors and local officials inside Russia were taking selfies with the kids, and they left their location settings public. Whoops. Based on that breakthrough, we were able to combine together very high-resolution satellite imagery and open-source intelligence methods to assess that at least 6,000 children, as of the start of 2023, had been temporarily or permanently taken to so-called patriotic re-education camps inside the temporary occupied territories in Russia itself. Just to give you the sense here, these facilities stretch from the Black Sea all the way to the Eastern Pacific, across Siberia, closer to Japan and Alaska, in some cases, than they are to Kyiv or Moscow. In 2023, building on that number, the International Criminal Court, with assistance from us through the Graham Amendment, helped indict President Putin and issue an arrest warrant for him and Maria Lvova-Belova. We believe that the actual number of children that Russia has taken, in our internal estimate, is closer to 35,000. You've heard the 19,500 number from our Ukrainian colleagues. We think that is actually low. That number is made up of 4 distinct groups that are spread out across Russian families and homes, but also 210 facilities. Those groups are kids in the camps, kids who have been taken from the battlefield after their parents have been killed in bombardment, kids who were taken from filtration camps when their parents were sent for interrogation after the fall of Mariupol. And the 4th group that I want to go in depth quickly on here are kids from institutions that have been basically hidden in plain sight on Russian adoption websites and in Russian databases as if they were Russian orphans. We've identified at least 314 children that have been unlawfully placed with Russian families. We presented this information to the Security Council in December 2024. The breakthrough in that case came from one of our analysts noticing wallpaper, of all things. A Humanitarian Research Lab analyst had seen basically a child in a photograph standing in front of teal and yellow wallpaper posted of a supposed Russian orphan. Going back, that analyst had seen the wallpaper before in a news story about a group of children from Ukraine taken to Russia that showed an identical backdrop. The analysts on our team deduced that Russia was hiding these children in front of us. Checking other photos, we found a pattern. That pattern led to understanding the abduction of these and other children, some of whom, based on satellite imagery, were transported from Ukraine on one of President Putin's own planes and held in Russian facilities until they were legally placed for adoption, led to a truly chilling realization. Half of the children we identified were placed in these databases with their siblings. With the limited time I have left, I want to say our funding has been terminated at Humanitarian Research Lab by the State Department, and we are running out of gas and running out of road. We've got about 4 to 6 weeks left. And I want to say to all of you, on behalf of our team, it has been the honor of a lifetime to serve in this mission, regardless of whether we get to continue doing it. Thank you, Senator.
These camps you talk about run the breadth of Russian territory. How many are there, do you?
Our initial estimate was 110, and that was wrong. It turned out to be 210, approximately. We found more since then, but 210 is our current high confidence assessment, sir.
Very briefly, what is the purpose of these camps?
3 purposes: to indoctrinate, militarize, and to isolate.
And all of these children going to these camps are Ukrainian, is that correct?
That is not correct. There are 3 groups of camps: those that are Ukrainian only,
Okay.
those that are mixed camps, and it really differs by age group, and the third are those that are specifically military training camps that sometimes are Ukrainian only and sometimes mixed.
In your estimate, there could be up to 35,000 Ukrainian children kidnapped by Russia, for lack of a better term?
That's our internal estimate right now. We are working to validate, sir.
Madam Ambassador, appreciate you being here. Make sure I understand. whatever negotiations are going on about territory and the size of the Ukrainian military, NATO, no NATO, the children is the policy or the position of the Ukrainian government. This is not negotiable. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, you're correct. All children who have been abducted are subjected to unconditional return under the jurisdiction of Ukraine.
Okay.
Can you walk us through what happened in terms of the contract termination, sort of when you were informed, how it got reversed, and then specifically what happened to the data file and how you sort of saved it?
On February 27th, we were informed that an exemption request by the now defunct Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operations to preserve us as essential was denied. And that day, we lost access to our database. That database had 13 large case files, which had contributed to the 4 indictments by the ICC against Russian High Command on attacks on civilian power generation infrastructure, as well as the kids' files. The kids' files included, for each kid, 30 to 40-page dossiers. We couldn't access it that morning. For several days, the State Department and our team and our prime implementer that we reported to were trying to find the location of these case files, which also included direct support to the Office of the Prosecutor General on specific homicides, which were not made public, performed with Department of Justice support. So we were trying to find, basically, the joke was, dude, where's my data? The situation is that there had been no plan for the preservation of the database.
Do you have the data now?
We do. And we were able, in our reinstatement, to transfer that data finally to 𝘞𝘀 and to the Ukrainian government.
What's the annual amount that you receive from the federal government under normal circumstances?
It varied, but it was approximately $4 to $5 million to our team directly.
Okay. And you're saying that the status of your contract renewal is still in question?
No, we have been formally terminated as of June. We are no longer a implementer for the U.S. State Department.
Who is going to do that work?
I do not know, sir.
Do you believe that the State Department has a plan and is not telling you, or do you believe that they don't have a plan?
We met with our colleagues today at State Department and had a very good discussion, but I'm not privy to their plan.
We simply cannot have this conversation without talking about the fact that, as Ranking Member Schatz just mentioned, earlier this year, the Trump administration abruptly cut off funding to help track the victims of Russian kidnapping and deliver justice. And as noted already, that data was almost all lost and delayed in being sent to the proper authorities. That was absolutely senseless. And today there is still no ongoing U.S. funding for this specific work. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that we're having this hearing today and to be here with so many others who are sending the message in a bipartisan way with our voices. And I hope we can send the same message with our laws, as well as by writing a very strong SFOPS bill that restores funding to help identify, track, and return victims of kidnapping, and restores the support to so many other worthy NGOs that have a long history of good work and bipartisan support, and that maintains robust support to Ukraine at this very critical moment. What is the single greatest obstacle that the United States faces in trying to compel Russia to return these abducted children?
Thank you for the excellent question. The reality is that for the Russians to return the kids, it is the same as testifying into committing a crime. Every single child returned has been a victim of a war crime. Mm-hmm. They can tell what happened to them. They can tell the law enforcement authorities what happened to the peers of theirs, what happened to their friends, what happened to their family members, what happened in towns they were born from. So that is very counter-instinctive for them to return the witnesses who would testify against them.
Why is accountability for war crimes, or perhaps Mrs. Reshevska, why is the accountability for war crimes and the release of all people unjustly held so important for peace to be just and lasting?
Thank you for this excellent question. I will start, and maybe Nathaniel will add something. As a lawyer, I can tell that there is no fair and just peace without accountability processes for those who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. It is needed not only for Ukrainian children and for Ukraine as a state. It is also needed for the international community to maintain the existing legal order and to avoid the repetition of all these atrocities in some other parts of our world. And also it should be noted that it also needed for Russians to avoid this resentment and to avoid the renewal of all these crimes and of all these atrocities in future in Ukraine or in some other parts of Europe, we see that Russians are militarizing children. Russians are preparing them to launch the new war of aggression. And that is why, without accountability for them, we just can't stop all these processes. We cannot tell to the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC to stop investigation. It is impossible under the Rome Statute. It is also impossible to stop the process of creation of the special tribunal for the aggression against Ukraine. It was already launched. And that is why I hope that in the near future, we will see the victory of justice.
Well, thank you. I was struck by the number of people on the first panel who mentioned the history of Europe and what happened with Germany and Adolf Hitler and the repetition that we're seeing now of those kinds of events. Mr. Raymond, did you want to add anything?
Yes, Senator Shaheen, the issue here is unique, specific to children. Underneath the Geneva Convention, there is something called the Special Protected Status. And it means children cannot be traded as hostages, spies, or POWs. So this is not just about Ukraine. It's about the future of all children in the wars of today and tomorrow. If we give the green light as the United States to treating kids like they're POWs or hostages, that special protected status is gone, and it's catastrophic.
As Freedom House has documented that the Lukashenko regime in Belarus is complicit in the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Can anyone speak to what we know about the scope of Lukashenko regime's involvement?
So as for the role of Lukashenko regime and the displacement of Ukrainian children to Belarus, since 2021 till 2024, we have documented 2,219 Ukrainian children who were displaced to 18 camps and other facilities in Belarus. But what is the fact? After our hearings last year in the United States Helsinki Commission, after all these sanctions imposed by those who organized these trips and re-education processes in Belarus, we see only 150 Ukrainian children in Belarus this year. It means that it had a frozen effect, at least. And one great example, it is about mayor of Novopolotsk. He was put under sanctions, and now there are no Ukrainian children in Novopolotsk.
Yeah, so I think one thing which I can guarantee for 100% that Ukraine had 100% access from all international monitors and organizations from every part of the world, be it across the aisle, be it from European Union, OSCE, or International Red Cross. We have granted the access to prisoners of war from the minute one. We have got them. We have granted the access to every facilities and every part of the territory, including the territory of Kursk region, which was occupied. The first thing after military operation was concluded, international monitors were granted access to that. So we have nothing to hide. We have been given access to every monitor who can do the fact check.
Has Russia committed war crimes?
I think it's not a court, we're not a judges, or we don't have a jury here, but this is the most documented war. And I've seen it with my own eyes when I came to Bucha, the bodies of those people who were buried in graves. And I talked to a priest who said that he were not allowed by Russian army to collect the bodies, and he had to go overnight to collect these bodies and bury them in a massive grave just behind his church. This is something you cannot unsee, unhear, or unknow. The justice has no time limits, and the justice is not limited to ending the war.
And of course, the topic of today's discussion is in and of itself a war crime, one of many that Vladimir Putin and Russian forces have committed. And yet this peace plan envisions a joint amnesty for war crimes, both for Russia and for Ukraine, which of course would end up being a get-out-of-jail-free card for Vladimir Putin, who has committed these crimes at a dizzying rate, including the separation and abduction of children. And so let me just finish by asking, just for yes or no answers from the other four panelists, do you believe it would be a good idea for any peace plan to involve giving Vladimir Putin or the Russian government immunity from the war crimes that they have committed? Just yes or no, because I've run out of time.
I have already expressed my idea. No, not at all. It doesn't correspond to the existing practice. No amnesty for war criminals during international armed conflicts. That's all.
No.
No, and it's not in the plan.
My answer is former commissioner, presidential commissioner, who participated in Minsk negotiation. I know what does it mean negotiate with Russians. It's no outcomes, but with the support, strong support of USA, we believe that it could be possible. We need your support and actions.
𝘠𝑦𝑒𝑡.
There's nothing more important to me right now than trying to get these kids back. And learn from 2014. Whatever we did in 2014 did not work. They invaded Ukraine, and it was a pathetic attempt to deter future aggression. At every turn, we had a chance to prevent this invasion. Pre-invasion sanctions, too provocative. Give Ukraine something other than goggles and blankets, too provocative. We are where we are, and my goal is to end this war honorably and justly to the extent that you can, and mainly to make sure this doesn't happen again, that Russia will not be allowed to invade a third time, because they'll be taking on security guarantees that are incredibly robust, that would include us and European allies that to be actually fighting more than the Ukrainian army. And I hope to make the Ukrainian army very strong. It's already very strong, but keep it strong. I didn't come here to talk about how to end the war, what you can accept or what you can't. I came here to tell the world we can't end this war until the children are accounted for. Whether everybody gets prosecuted or not, very seldom does that happen in any war. But it is unconscionable to end this war without the world trying to get these kids back. Thank you all.